Ο Σινάν Σίντι είναι ένας από τους πιο επιδραστικούς αναλυτές θεμάτων Τουρκίας εδώ στην Ουάσιγκτον και τον συναντήσαμε στο πλαίσιο του 5ου Φόρουμ για την Νότιο-Ανατολική Ευρώπη. Ας παρακολουθήσουμε τι μας είπε. Sinan, thanks for being with Earth tonight. Over the course of the last 12 months, we have experienced an unprecedented moratorium between Greece and Turkey. And I say this taking into account what happened over the course of the last 4 years. Now, do you sense that part of it is attributed to the fact that President Erdogan might be waiting for the result, the outcome of the presidential election here in the US?
It's hard to say. I mean, he certainly needs to curry more favor right now, I think, with the United States, but also the European Union for a whole number of reasons. He's facing local elections at home. He needs to win those. He's trying to insert himself regionally as a brokering power in the Arab-Israeli war. He would like to obviously acquire, even though the deal has been signed and dotted to Turkey to receive F-16s, he still, as I understand, has to uphold certain transfer rights and transfer conditions. So as far as it goes right now, he's not in a position to continue sort of antagonizing immediate neighbors, be it Greece or Cyprus. He doesn't need the sort of antagonistic sort of relationship that he previously had between 2019 to 2022, 2023. So we've seen sort of relative calm in the Eastern Mediterranean right now, simply because Erdogan cannot afford, I would say, to sort of keep up tensions right now.
And the economy is another factor, I guess, right?
That's a huge problem for him. I mean, the more tensions that continue to rise between Turkey and its immediate neighbors, or let's just call it the European Union, right? That's going to increase Turkey's risk premium, regardless of what he thinks about it. I mean, he understands this. And right now, he needs to curry favor with international investors. I still don't think he's doing that correctly. But, yes, the economy is in a terrible state at this point, and I don't think it's going to get any better. But until the elections are over in March, he certainly has no wiggle room to sort of go on a foreign policy sort of adventure.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Now, Victoria Nuland said in an interview with the Turkish television that Turkey would be able to join the F-35 program as long as the issue of its acquisition of the Russian S-400 missiles is resolved. Do you really find this a realistic scenario?
No. Look, Turkey has not addressed the issue of why it acquired the S-400s in the first place, and it has never addressed the issue of what it can and should do with them. My prediction is that Turkey is going to hold on to those S-400s for many, many years in essentially just bunkers until we don't know. He's just going to hold on to that. Giving them up would be a huge diplomatic fiasco for him, but also I think the Russians would essentially be very angry with the Erdogan government if those should be transferred to a third party, whether it's the United States or another country such as, I don't know, India, right? Or, even less likely if they were given to Ukraine. The State Department is trying unrealistically, I would argue, to sort of take advantage of a small window of opportunity following Turkey's acceptance of Sweden as a NATO country to see if they can explore any sort of way to essentially bring Turkey back into the Western fold. I don't fault them for that, but Erdogan is not addressing any of the root causes of what divides Turkey and the West. So just dangling this notion of you can get back into the F-35 program if you just give up the S-400s, I think is both unrealistic, but I also think it's dangerous simply because it doesn't address other major concerns that policymakers in Washington or Europe have raised that Erdogan is engaged in. So it is also I would say, a reflection of the State Department's ongoing, I would say, dream that Turkey is too big a country to lose, and that we need to find a way to work with it no matter what they do.
Okay.
And dangling the F-35 seems to be just another avenue for them.
I'll get to the point where we discuss it's too big to fail, but before we get into that, what do you think of Turkey's role during the Israeli-Hamas war? Did it play the role it envisioned, and are the Arab countries acknowledging the role that Ankara wants to play as, say, the leader in the Muslim world?
So I think Turkey's policy towards Hamas, or in the wider Israeli-Arab war right now, is a reflection of Erdogan's own ideological preferences. I think that's the primary driver of why he essentially wants to continuously support Hamas. And I don't think that's going to change, because even if you look at Erdogan for the last 40 years in his political career, he is sympathetic to sort of Islamic resistance towards Israel's right to exist. He's never turned that down, right? And so, Hamas has existed in Turkey since 2011. It has been given breathing room. It was initially accommodated by the present foreign minister, Hakan Fidan. He is the initiator of Hamas's essential location in Turkey as an entity. They have championed their leadership by giving them passports. The vast majority of Hamas's financial funding comes through Turkey. And this is a way that Turkey finds itself to brand itself to most domestic voters as a protector of Muslim peoples, as an anti-imperialist sort of country in Erdogan's own sort of mindset. But on the other hand, it's trying to play a sort of a mediator role. It would like to see itself play a mediator role, like Qatar, to essentially see if it can negotiate the release of hostages, but also to see if Turkey can secure sort of rebuilding contracts for Gaza. I think Erdogan's interested in that too. But I don't think he's taken very seriously by the Arab world, simply because Turkey has burned bridges with everybody, right? I mean, if Turkey wanted to be taken seriously as a serious mediator in this problem, in this crisis, then he should not have referred to the Israeli government prime minister as quote a Nazi, and call Israel a genocidal state. Because at some level, there is no way that Israel, a major party in the conflict, can reach an accommodation with Hamas, and Turkey, one of its main champions, when Hamas doesn't recognize the state of Israel's right to exist as a country. So I think Erdogan's really overstepped his mark, and unfortunately he's burned all bridges with many regional actors, but some still hold out that Turkey can play a small role in negotiations.
Do you think that the relations between Turkey and Israel are at the point of no return, meaning we cannot see the situation that we would see until 2009 and the Mavi Marmara incident?
I mean, the Israelis have never basically regained their trust for the Turkish government since that flotilla incident, but even preceding that, with the Davos incident when Erdogan berated President Shimon Peres at the time, and the Israelis have always been sort of cautious, and they've explored ways and channels to see if they can build a working relationship with Turkey. I think because they don't want to shove Turkey out. They're a pragmatic state. They're a practical state. They would, based on the Abraham Accords, they've been willing to build a broader coalition with Muslim countries. But with Turkey, the Israelis, as is everyone else in the region, they take everything that Erdogan does with a pinch of salt. So he began this notion of a rapprochement with Israel, starting in about 2022. They reappointed ambassadors. They had a state visit from Israel to Ankara. But with the October 7 attacks, Erdogan's completely sort of reverted back to his factory settings and essentially sort of used this opportunity to brand themselves as the protector of the Palestinian people, which I find to be really disingenuous, simply because whilst Erdogan undermines Israel verbally, but also by supporting Hamas actively, saying that the world should boycott Israel, Turkey's trade volume with Israel has not gone down 1% since the October 7 attacks. In fact, we track this, that Turkey's volume of trade between Israel and Turkey has increased by up to 30% since the October 7 attacks. And some of the beneficiaries of that trading relationship are Turkey's former Prime Minister, Binali Yildirim, his son, but also one of Erdogan's sons, who are in charge of companies, who own companies which trade with Israel actively. So this is all a little insincere and duplicitous on the part of Erdogan.
Back to the discussion of the West not wanting to lose Turkey, as it's considered to be a very important country in the region. Greece, I guess, that understands the value of keeping the neighboring country within the Western institutions, the Western values, etc. But is this the vision for Erdogan's Turkey?
Probably not. The vision that Greece set out towards Turkey basically dates back to, I would say, the 1999 earthquakes, the so-called earthquake diplomacy between the two countries. And at that time, we had Yorgos Papadopoulos.
Yorgos Papandreou.
Papandreou. And on the other side, we had Ismail Cem, and we had this sort of flourishing of diplomatic sort of ties, really tabling of some difficult issues. Greece lifted its objections to Turkey's EU accession because there was a change of...
It was a totally different zeitgeist.
Right, it was, exactly. And because, it was a fundamental realization that a Turkey inside of Europe or close to Europe was in Greece's best interest and the European Union's best interest. And I think, Greece's foreign ministry today still has the basic view that, Greece does not want to be the frontier state, right? They would rather have a good neighborly sort of relationship with Turkey, one way or another, if they can solve bilateral problems, either directly or through mediation. But essentially, Erdogan makes that impossible because we never know essentially when he's going to tap into his foreign policy portfolio, right? Turn to the page of Greece and Cyprus and use that as a means to antagonize them, because at home, that sort of antagonism, the threatening towards Greece, threatening its sovereignty, or continuously digging to not resolve or seriously take steps to address the Cyprus issue, wins votes for him. But it also makes its immediate neighbors guess, is Erdogan going to essentially do something rash? Are we going to see conflict in the Eastern Mediterranean? But beyond that, just the immediate Erdogan's mentions, I think 20 years of his rule, the anti-Westernism, the the anti-Americanism, the anti-Israeli, just this whole sort of anti-foreigner sort of mindset has gripped the country, and he has really successfully injected this notion that foreign entities are out to essentially undermine Turkey. So this is not the vision. I don't think Erdogan is at all interested in substantively addressing bilateral issues.
Last September, the G20 countries initiated the IMEC corridor, India, Middle East, and Europe, and Turkey is not a part of this corridor. Is that an issue for Turkey to somehow, raise its arm and say, "Hey, I'm one of the biggest countries in the region, and whatever plans you have, you should also include me in"?
I mean, I would say it can do that. It's not really going to help it. But as far as whether it's IMEC, whether it's the East Mediterranean Gas Forum, right, all these initiatives that have begun in the 2010s, or more recently than that, regardless, are essentially exploratory sort of diplomatic and economic as well as energy initiatives that seeks to build new, safe, sustainable alternatives to securing energy and other sort of trade relationships. Just the fact that Israel and, if I'm not mistaken, Lebanon demarcated maritime borders, right, was probably unthinkable a decade ago, right? With the falling apart of relationship between Turkey and Israel, the Israelis didn't waste any time in building up a relationship with other Muslim countries because they need to essentially survive and thrive in the region. They can't just wait for Turkey to essentially come back. But in terms of why Turkey hasn't been included in any of these, it's not because they don't want to include Turkey. It's because Turkey presents too much of a big risk in terms of how do we negotiate, with you. And until Turkey addresses some core issues in the region, right? The fact that it doesn't recognize the Republic of Cyprus is a huge problem. We cannot move on this issue. We cannot have Turkey included in the East Mediterranean Gas Forum or it doesn't recognize the existence of Crete. It's just a huge problem.
Which power you think can influence, put pressure on Turkey the most? Is it the US? Is it Germany and the EU? Is it Russia?
I would say until now, I would say the country which has most sort of influenced Turkish foreign policy behavior has been the Russians, right? To the point that the Russians pressured Turkey into buying the S-400s as part of a resolution for why, after Turkey shot down the Russian fighter jet in November 2015, one of the conditions that Putin wanted to normalize relations was, you're going to buy S-400s, right? And Erdogan apologized to Putin after Putin essentially terminated trade relationships, tourism, right? The purchase of produce and agricultural goods from Turkey, which shrank Turkey's economy by close to 0.5 percentage point GDP point. And that sort of pressure really influenced Erdogan to reverse course in his treatment of Russia. With the United States and Europe, it's two different relationships. I think Erdogan has successfully managed to frighten the European Union. The European powers seem to think that unless they find a way to accommodate Erdogan, then Erdogan's just going to open the borders and allow millions of refugees to cross into Europe. So I would say Brussels is too afraid of Erdogan to essentially sort of criticize him too much. The United States is unfortunately too focused on Turkey's too big to fail. We cannot burn this bridge. Some call this Iran syndrome, right? In the way that the United States lost Iran in 1979 to find it sort of reinvented as a monster regime, right? They do not want to sort of break all ties with Turkey or force Turkey to completely sever ties with its relationship with the United States such that it really transforms into a sort of Russian or Chinese influenced state.
Finally, and I'm quoting Sινάν Σίντι here, if we accept that Erdogan will remain in power indefinitely, should the West just learn to live with him? After all, he is the devil we know. And just to add something to your line, your quote, that's an opinion widely welcomed in Athens.
Because he's the devil you know.
Yeah.
Well,
and also because what we've seen with the Kemalist regime over the course of the last 30, 40 years was not that welcoming in the Aegean waters.
Right. So this is the essential calculus I think that people are making in the sense that he's the devil we know. So it's best to essentially build a stronger relationship with him as we can, or find a way to accommodate. Or a transactional relationship. But the problem with that viewpoint is, unfortunately, Erdogan is one day today or tomorrow, he's not going to be in power, either through natural causes or he's going to be voted out, probably less likely, right? But at that point, there will be a competition for power. What the West will have to decide then, or sort of come to terms with, is what kind of Turkey they're going to deal with. Are they going to deal with another one man to succeed Erdogan, another cult of personality that centralizes all decision-making into his hands and will dictate how Turkey behaves? Or will Turkey rebuild or attempt to rebuild its institutional sort of governmental network such that policy, whether it's foreign policy or security policy or defense policy, is the product of a number of institutions coming together? At that point, I would say right now that's an unknown. Mm-hmm. But at this very moment, Erdogan is the man to deal with. There is no other alternative to that. There is no other back channel, other people, except a very few number of people close to Erdogan that people have to deal with. But the fact that we are dealing with one person, or whether it's Europe or whether it's individual countries, it's very precarious because they are beholden to the views, the desires, and wishes of one man. And for now, the most important thing for Erdogan is regime survival. And therefore, everything that he does is looked through the lens of how does this help me retain power in Turkey? And that's a problem.
Sινάν, thank you very much for being with Earth tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to be here.